So this is one of a series of conversations we've had, particularly about energy in Alaska. Tonight we're going to try and put it in the larger context of the economy of the state and the economy of the country and the world. So the first person who's going to give us that big picture is David Rubenstein, who happens also to be my spouse of a good many years.
Can everybody hear me? Thank you all for coming. I very much appreciate your giving us the time and attention this evening. We're going to go through a little bit about Alaska because all of you probably have some connection to Alaska, or at least some interest in it. That's why you're probably here. And so we thought we'd give you a little bit more perspective. I am always interested in talking about Alaska for two particular reasons. I have started a large investment firm many years ago. It's called the Carlyle Group. Some of you may have heard of it. And in other parts of the United States, I'm known as an investor. In Alaska, I'm known as Alice's husband. But in other parts, I'm known for Carlyle. But the truth is, Carlyle really started because of Alaska. People don't really realize this, but when we first started, we didn't have a lot of money and we didn't have a lot of name recognition. But the United States Congress had passed a law which said that Alaskan Native corporations could sell their tax losses to other corporations in the United States. And this was the only thing of this type in the United States. And so when we were starting our firm, we were kind of heard about this and we decided to broker these transactions. And so we were representing the Alaska Native corporations trying to find buyers. And the buyers were all over the United States. They were descending upon our offices in Washington because they could buy these tax losses and it would help them save a lot of money in taxes. And we brokered billions of dollars of deals. When the bill had passed Congress, it had been said that it would cost the U.S. Treasury about $50 million. It may have cost a few $billion because we were pretty creative in finding losses. But I've always, therefore, been very appreciative of Alaska for that, and I learned a lot of lessons from it in those days because I'd always been grown up to think that the great human motivators in life were food, shelter, and, let's say, reproduction. I learned that tax avoidance is a much higher motivation, probably much higher than even reproduction. And so all the great CFOs of the world were coming, or United States were coming to try to buy these tax losses. So that's one of the reasons I very much like Alaska. A second reason is this. I'm in the investment business, as I mentioned, and Alaska is probably been the greatest single investment anybody has ever made. It was bought in 1867. I don't know how many people here know what the purchase price was. $7.2 million at roughly 2 cents an acre. And I wish we at Carlyle could make investments quite as good as that one. Think about how cheap that was for the United States to buy at 7.2, though it was criticized as a expensive purchase price in those days. Today, what I'd like to talk about a little bit is the economy and talk about how that impacts Alaska and give one particular strand of thought to it. You all have read that we are out of or almost out of a recession. The recession was the deepest recession we've had since the Great Depression. It's called now the Great Recession. Since World War II, we've had 11 recessions and we've had 11 recoveries. And so we're going to have a recovery here, but the recovery is going to be different than any other recovery we've had since World War II. And by that I mean that we have had such a deep recession. This recession lasted at least 22 months. Most recessions in the United States last about 10 months. The stock market went down, peak to trough, 58%. Most times in a recession, the stock market goes down about, I'd say about 22, 23%. So it's much deeper, and unemployment's very, very high. And as a result of the deep recession we're in, when we are technically out of this recession, when somebody says we're not in the recession any longer, it's not going to be a panacea. Now, when all of you went to college and took an economics course, you were told what a recession is, 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. So we'll be out of that probably by this quarter or next. But that doesn't really give you a good indication of how serious our economic problems are. When we're out of this recession, we're still going to have an enormous amount of debt in our country. We have $11.4 trillion of debt. Now, get your hands around what a trillion is. If the day that Jesus Christ was born, $1 million was put in a bank account, and every single day from that day on, 2009 years later, $1 million was put in every single day, you still wouldn't be at a trillion. So trillion is a lot. Well, we have $11.4 trillion of federal debt, not counting, because of the recession, the $5 trillion of additional Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac debt we have. and not counting the $41 trillion of unfunded pension liabilities for Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Overall, we have $57 trillion of debt, 200,000 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. So we have some problems. We also have the problem that the annual debt is very large. This year, we're going to run a $1.6 trillion annual deficit. No other country in the world has a $1.6 trillion budget. We have a $1.6 trillion deficit. We also are going to have very high unemployment for quite some time. Before this recession started, it was 4.5%. It's now 9.7%, but that's deceptive. We really have unemployment of about 16%, because if you count the people who are looking for full-time jobs but don't have them, it's 16%. The teenage unemployment rate is 25%. Okay? So we have very severe unemployment. We're going to have it for a while. Unemployment's not going down to 4.5% for any time soon. We also are going to have the problem that our dollar. Our currency has been the world's greatest currency for many years. It's the reserve currency. It's the only currency in the world that really is a reserve currency. People want to buy it. But now people are not afraid of their own currency as much. And because of the debt we have, we're going to be seeing the value of our own dollar going down. We also have a problem that taxes are going to be going up. To pay for all the debt, taxes are going up, and not just on the upper 5%. There will be a lot of other taxes going forward. Despite the best intentions of the president, we're going to have a lot of higher taxes. So going forward over the next couple of years, as we try to get out of this recession and go into a recovery, we're going to have a lot of economic problems. One of the other economic problems is going to be the higher energy prices we're going to be paying for foreign oil. When we had our first energy shock in 1973, at that time we were importing about 6 million barrels of oil a day. President Nixon said we need to be energy independent. We don't want to import as much oil as we are, and that was costing, at those days, the price of oil was relatively cheap. It was it was about a couple dollars a barrel. It quadrupled in 1973, quadrupled, but still it was relatively modest compared to today. Today we're importing 12 million barrels of oil a day and paying roughly $350 billion to $400 billion a year for that. So as the economies recover around the world, what you're going to see is greater and greater interest in more and more energy, and energy prices will go up. We haven't really recognized completely in our country exactly how important Alaska has been to our energy solution. Alaska now produces 20% of all the oil produced in the United States, 20%. If we didn't have Alaska, which we bought for $7 million, we would be in far worse shape than we are today. And I think it's very important to recognize the enormous natural resources that Alaska brings to the table, and how Alaska's ability to help us with our economic problems and reducing our dependence on foreign oil is a very, very real solution that's available to Americans if we want it.